United Nations disco. This lesson is magical because we'll be looking at the aims of the United Nations and assessing the extent to which the United Nations achieves those aims. So let's dive right in, shall we? Whee! Ow! Ah, my legs! In this lesson, I've chosen the 3 fundamental aims of the United Nations. First is the aim to extend and maintain international peace and security. Second is the promotion of sustainable development and the elimination of poverty. And third is the aim of promoting and advancing the cause of human rights. The UN's first and most primary aim is maintaining and extending international peace and security. The UN does this in a number of ways. It establishes and carries out peacekeeping missions to help resolve conflict, maintain peace in post-conflict situations, and attempt to build lasting and sustainable peace in those environments. The UN also pursues weapons reduction known as disarmament, especially nuclear disarmament.
You can't hug your children with nuclear arms.
And the UN often engages in the practice of preventative diplomacy. Which basically equates to the UN acting as a global kindergarten teacher, telling states to use their words, not their hands. So that's some of the ways in which the UN seeks to achieve the aim of maintaining and extending international peace and security. But to what extent does the UN actually achieve that aim? It's safe to say to a variable extent. On one hand, for example, peacekeeping has actually had some measured successes in some conflicts around the world since 2000. For example, the UN peacekeeping mission in Sierra Leone, a country in Western Africa which collapsed into a seriously brutal civil war in the 1990s. Peacekeepers there helped implement a new peace treaty, disarmed and helped demobilize more than 75,000 ex-fighters, hundreds of whom were child soldiers, and carried out a disarmament program which saw over 42,000 weapons and 1.2 million rounds of ammunition destroyed. But on the other hand, when it comes to wars between states, the UN has been far less successful. In 2003, for example, the US led a coalition of states to invade Iraq without UN Security Council approval. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia without UN Security Council approval. And then Russia went on in 2014 to invade Ukraine without UN Security Council approval. Because basically, and if it isn't abundantly clear to you right now, if you're a state, and particularly a powerful state, you just do whatever you want. The UN means nada. The UN seeks to achieve these things through a whole range of programs and initiatives, the most well-known of these initiatives being the Millennium Development Goals. Basically, in the year 2000, the UN brought together states to agree on a number of ambitious goals, which included the elimination of extreme hunger and poverty, the achievement of universal primary education, the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment for women, the reduction in child mortality, environmental sustainability, and developing a global partnership for development. A lot of things. The deadline for these goals was 2015. So this will help us to assess the extent to which the UN is achieving that aim of eliminating extreme poverty and promoting sustainable development. On one hand, some of the Millennium Development Goals have been achieved. For instance, one of the targets was to halve the amount of people living in extreme poverty, that is, people living on less than $1.25 US a day, which in 1990 was 47% of the planet's population.
Holy shit!
Incredibly, the amount of people living in extreme poverty globally reduced from 47% in 1990 to just 14% in 2015. This is in no small part due to China, whose current population is 1.83 billion people, or 18% of the entire global population, which reduced rates of extreme poverty from 61% in 1990 to just 4% in 2015. But wait, what if you live on slightly more than $1.25 a day? Precisely. In 2015, 3 billion people still lived on less than $2.50 a day. That still means 3 billion people, just half the population of the planet, are still living in conditions which we can all agree constitute abject poverty. So again, when it comes to this aim of promoting sustainable development and eliminating poverty, we can see that the UN's success has been variable. But what of the UN's third aim? The UN's third aim is the promotion and protection of human rights internationally. How does the UN try to do this? Well, in a number of ways. 2 really big ones are bringing states together to formulate, sign, and then implement treaties such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Another thing the UN does is actually goes out and advocates about human rights. The most public of this advocacy are the international days which have been established by the UN, such as Women's Day, Children's Day, International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, International Yoga Day. There's even International Yoga Day. However, I worry that the impact of these days may be somewhat diminished by companies like Facebook getting involved.
Can I come too?
With things like Friends Day. Okay, I'm just gonna log on to my Facebook. Oh, Friends Day. Sounds interesting. also works with NGOs and governments to try and set up alternative schemes which may reduce exploitation at a ground level. However, and you can probably guess where I'm going with this, the UN, without an enforcement mechanism, is largely powerless when it comes to stopping human rights abuses carried out by states. Let's look locally, shall we? The United Nations High Commission for Refugees and High Commission for Human Rights, who are responsible for monitoring the implementation of human rights and refugee treaties, have repeatedly called on Australia to amend, if not end, its policy of offshore detention. Because whether or not you support the policy, it's still breaking laws against arbitrary detention. That is, detaining people without any legal justification, which is outlawed in international treaties, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself and the UN Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment, which Australia signed in 1989. We signed the treaties, we agreed to abide by the laws, like it or not. Yet the Australian government has repeatedly ignored the UN and continues its policy of detaining asylum seekers. I'm going to say it very clearly, seeking asylum is not illegal, including children. As if they had a choice. What would children do? Stay behind and look after the house? So again, when it comes to assessing the extent to which the UN achieves its goals of promoting and extending human rights, we can see that once again, it's variable. Well, we can see that the UN achieves a range of its aims to a varying extent. The UN has achieved some of its aims, however, it still relies on states to probably implement and help it achieve those aims. Or at least not to just everything up in the blind pursuit of their own national interests at the cost of everything else. Next lesson, we're going to look at an institution that actually achieves its goals because it has money, the IMF.